Welcome to the Digital Accessibility Podcast, hosted by me, Joe James, and sponsored by PCR Digital, who provide people-centric recruitment. Throughout the series, I'll be interviewing advocates, experts, and practitioners of digital accessibility to help raise awareness for the work that they do and discuss the role digital accessibility has in all of our lives. I hope that you find value in these discussions and are inspired to join the journey towards a more accessible digital world. So sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy the show. Today I'm joined by Bev Newing, current accessibility lead at the Ministry of Justice. The Ministry of Justice is the largest government body in the UK, which employs over 90,000 people. So you can imagine just how huge and wide-reaching the programmes of work Bev heads up are. Bev's background is in front-end and general web development, starting at the Ministry of Justice as an accessibility specialist to help people better understand the public sector body's accessibility regulations, or PSBAR, created and ran training workshops and provided accessibility consultancy on services across the whole department, now working up to leading things. I've had the absolute pleasure of meeting Bev in person and watching them talk at Accessibility Scotland in 2023, which was fascinating. I hope that all of our listeners will now gain an insight into Bev's day-to-day and super interesting approaches to digital accessibility, but that's enough from me. So welcome to the podcast, Bev.
Thank you for having me, Joe. And it was great to get to meet you too. It was a good conference, wasn't it?
It was brilliant. Yeah, it was actually one of the first that I've travelled for work. So yeah, I was so nervous, just because I get really anxious.
Mm.
But such great people, such great company. So I felt much more at ease as the day went on. But I'm sure we'll get a bit more into that as the podcast goes on. But cool. I hope that the intro was relatively accurate in terms of your background and what you're currently doing. And I guess being the accessibility lead at the UK government's largest department is no small undertaking. um, from the outside looking in, my assumption would be that there is an awful lot of pressure on your shoulders. So the worry is that you might be overworked or feeling overworked or burned out, which is a huge and key topic in the community, unfortunately. But do you feel that, and have you got any tips for how you may have managed things?
Yeah, burnout is a hot topic right now, isn't it? Everybody's talking about it. I would say though, I think in my department the biggest pressure comes from me. Our senior management are all actually really supportive and really great. But I think with accessibility there is this kind of sense of, as a specialist, you know, the impact of what it is to not make something accessible, and you're kind of tasked with telling people this and trying to inform them and teach them, and that's quite an intense situation when you're kind of aware, like emotionally, of if we don't do this then people might be excluded, and it's quite a tough one to manage, really. And also, it's a big department. There's a lot of stuff to do, and I'm a bit of a magpie. I like shiny things, like, oh, that's a fun project. Oh, over there, that's a fun project. And so trying to be like, no, that's not on the roadmap.
Keeping yourself sort of your focus centralized, I guess, is
Yeah.
it's going to be tricky. Yeah, because so much to do, so little time.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I guess like disciplining yourself, I suppose, in a way to keep on the roadmap.
Yeah, it's as well trying to figure out when do we need to pivot versus when do we need to stick as well, because it's being agile. We operate in a fairly, like, you know, we sort of plan as we go along, but there are some things that we know we need to get done, but then things pop up, and yeah, it's a work in progress, that one.
Absolutely. And I guess, are there certain telltale signs? Are there certain times where you're like, oh, actually, I need to take a step back?
Yeah, I got very burnt out last year, and I actually have now noticed that when I get stressed, my sinuses start to like constrict.
Oh, wow.
And if I let it get really bad, I'll get a fever. So now I can sort of tell, like, oh, am I getting a bit toasty, like, oh, that's a sign, this is a stressful meeting. Then after that, I'll be like, right, go for a little walk, like walk it off, like get a glass of water, like move around a little bit. But yeah, like really listening to like, what is my body trying to tell me in these situations? Yeah. It's work in progress, so that one. And also you need to listen, not be like, no, it's fine, I'll just go into the next meeting. Like, nope, nope.
Yeah, very true. Because then you're no good to anyone, I suppose. And I
Yeah.
mean, paramount is yourself. You need to look after oneself. Well, you're never any good to anyone else. I've learnt that the hard way in personal life as well, trying to look after family members that are unwell while still trying to juggle everything and work as well. And it you need to just listen to other people telling you, stop, but also yeah, like just take the time for yourself, because you're no good to anyone when you're burned out. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think Sean was talking about it on the last podcast as well, and saying just take time out if you need it. And yeah, that is just really good advice. Nothing, things can wait a week. In the most cases, things can wait a week, and it's just really worth taking that time out. And if you feel like you can't, it's also worth thinking, why can't I? Like, what has become so important and so dependent on me, and why is the volume of work so big, and what does that actually mean about my job? And is it one person's job? Is it three people's job? And how do I also make myself not a single point of failure?
Yeah, very true. I think that's the thing. It depends on team size and delegation,
Yeah.
and have you got people that you can delegate to? It's it's a bit of a minefield. I was talking with Heather Hepburn earlier today, and mentioned before the podcast, and um, she was telling me how building the Champions Network within Skyscanner has just helped exponentially, because you're not necessarily responsible for those people's day jobs, but they are
Yeah.
invested and helpful, and I see that as a great growing aspect to accessibility teams initially, I think. But while we're still trying to grow that awareness and gain that buy-in, I think if you can just have proactive um, what would you call them, good actors instead of bad actors, people that just want to help, I suppose.
Yeah.
It can just really, really help move things along.
Yeah, and like not and making sure that you've got really robust ways of capturing the data as well. So one thing that a trap's not the right word for it, but one thing that I fell into in the first couple of years was responding to people on Slack. They'd message, I'd respond, I'd answer their question, and then there'd be more questions and more questions. Before you know it, you'd have like 5 Slacks open, and you wouldn't have any of the data of what it was they wanted and their timeframes. So what we've done is take a step back and say, cool, yeah, I'll respond to you on Slack, but here's the form, fill it out, and you tell us who you are, where your application is, what's your deadline for this, how do you want to be spoken, like do you want Teams or do you want a Google Meet call? And then that way you've also got the data, so at the end of the month you can say, oh, we had 14 people message us. And then when you talk to senior leaders, you can say, this is the kind of trend we're seeing over time, these are the topics. And then then you're not being then people know to go somewhere else and not just come straight to you, because then that gets a little bit stressful.
Definitely. Like you said, again, with the single point of failure, you don't want to be, if you've got all, then even just internally for yourself, you feel that is entirely just on you. But yeah, knowing that there are other areas that can sort of help you with that must help.
Yeah.
But brilliant. Okay, cool. So I guess moving on to the next sort of question, we're all individuals. We all have different things that make us tick. A bit of an insight to me, a very key motivator in work and life is actually feedback and recognition, and that makes me sound very needy, which is a topic we were talking about as well before the podcast. But that's what really makes me tick. But some people find that unusual for a recruiter, um, sometimes seen as a bit money grabbing, and where's the next deal coming from. But yeah, so if I know I've done a good job and I get that feedback, that really, really makes me happy and motivated to carry on doing, what I'm doing. So is there anything in particular that helps you stay on track, but also maintain your motivation for what you're doing with all that pressure at the Ministry of Justice?
Yeah, and I can relate to being needy. We're all just human, aren't we, at the end of the day? We're all humans trying to like figure out this life thing, aren't we?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for me, a big driver in this job is getting to talk to people who are also interested in the same sort of thing. Like one thing that I used to run, I don't do as much of anymore, but I used to run a book club where we'd get together and we'd watch documentaries about disability and then discuss it afterwards. And it was really fun. And it was just really interesting as well to have a group of people to kind of have a good discussion with and share things with and kind of grow and evolve with. And that's been really fun. Yeah, I really enjoyed doing that.
Oh, amazing. I guess it takes it away from just the work day sort of
Yeah.
element as well, doesn't it? You can get a different perspective on things, and just growing that friendship outside of the work day as well, I think helps to build that community.
Yeah, especially in this slightly more remote world that we're in these days.
Post COVID, I think I'll call it. Post COVID world.
Yeah, oh, we hope. Yeah, I think for me, growth is a big motivator. Like, how do you learn to make situations easier as well? And I'm a big fan of working for government. At MOJ, I get 5 days volunteering leave a year, so I go and volunteer with Three Rings CSE, who do the volunteer management software behind organisations like Samaritans, Childline, Nightlines. That's really fun. And yeah, there's a good L&D package as well, so you can kind of go to conferences and meet people. And yeah, I think that kind of community is a really big driver for me.
Yeah. It sounds like like you say, the learning and development and sort of gaining that knowledge or growing your knowledge within the space and in other areas is another key motivator. So it's great that you've got that at the MOJ, and it is tricky, I think, especially in the private sector where it is very much about budget and profit, the bottom line, P&L. So it's hard when recruiting people into these roles as well, when there's already not as much of a buy-in, I suppose, is the key word, for accessibility, then trying to explain the value behind the role and, you know, the worth of the person that's got all of these years of experience and have spent a lot of time and money and resources getting to that point, only to offer them half of what they're actually worth is yeah. But if there was something like an L&D budget, or giving people the opportunity to have sort of leave days or days dedicated to um, just more personal development or working on other things outside of their day to day, then that could be, something that entices people into roles. But um, yeah, hopefully that will begin to change as the market grows.
I hope so. I mean, the DDAP framework, where we've now listed out accessibility as in head of, senior, mid, and junior, has helped because it's kind of given us a kind of North Star really to say, oh, you're a mid level. If you want to progress to senior, here's the behaviours that you need to kind of do. And then that can then feed into a learning plan. And that just makes our lives a lot easier.
Absolutely. There's another thing we'll probably come on to a little bit more later, but while we're on it now, because I know I'll forget, something I've been discussing recently with other members of different sort of departments in government, but also applicants that are trying to sort of get roles within this space. They've mentioned that I think there's still the DDAT framework is excellent. It's covered so much off, but I think the only element at the moment, there's still quite a lot of ambiguity when it comes to accessibility roles being hands-on development experience, because if someone is a hands-on developer, they could earn twice, three times, four times what someone who's purely focusing in accessibility could earn. But it shouldn't be that way, because that's just going to push people out away from accessibility and into creating more potentially inaccessible technology.
Yeah.
But I think it's definitely huge strides in the right direction. I think that we need to just maybe revalue certain skill sets and make sure that they're being recompensated fairly.
Yeah, definitely. I think Craig shared in his recent blog post the kind of bands that the roles align to, and that probably does align, roughly speaking, with development and user research and design and so on. But it was public sector again. How does that compare to private sector? And then is that translated into the private sector? And with that new legislation coming into effect in some point in the near future, yeah, we're going to need to see a lot more people, aren't we?
We definitely are. And then that goes even further back into education and things. But you know me, we could probably talk for hours on end. We might help, but um, I'll just move on just briefly onto the next question, which was around your talk at Accessibility Scotland, which covered off a huge amount of things as well. So it was lovely seeing you talk. It was really engaging and interesting, and it was actually really funny. You put a lot of humor in there, and it just came across really powerfully. So as I know that you've said that you're quite a quiet person, and when we've met, you are quite quiet and reserved, but I'm also someone, weirdly enough, that suffers with social anxiety. I've got a very good mask that I can hide behind, learn how to deal with it. But I'd love to know how that you found that whole process, because it's a very daunting thing. There was an actual stage and lots of people and a microphone. So was there anything in particular that you did to help your nerves in leading up to that?
There were a lot of nerves. I am an anxious camper. I remember in the week before, there was one evening where I was seriously considering not doing it. And I very nearly was like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it anymore. And I decided, no, it's too close. It's too close to the date. I'm just gonna do it. I also find, because I'm quite quiet, I can't actually do very many run-throughs because it actually hurts my throat to talk too much. I must talk in a really weird, throaty way or something. But yeah, if I did more than 2 run-throughs, my throat would start to hurt. So there was also that going on. So I was like, okay, well, I can't do it too many times through. And then getting to the conference itself was also quite a stressful trek. So yeah, it's funny because when I reflect on that talk, I think it was probably the best talk I've given and the one that I presented the most confidently in, but it was carnage around it. And the day before, I live in Margate, which is the opposite end of the country to Edinburgh. My talk was at 10 a.m. or something like 10 a.m. in the morning. It takes about 8 hours to get to Edinburgh, and I rocked up at the train station at 3:30 p.m. on the day before, and there was a big queue outside of it, and somebody was like, oh yeah, the station's caught fire. And I was like, excuse me?
I have a talk to give.
Yeah, I was like, I have to be in Edinburgh for 10 a.m. And they were like, oh, okay. Don't know, you could wait. And I was like, well, I actually literally can't because the last train leaves King's Cross at 7 or 8 p.m. So I had to trek around to a different train station, and Margate is literally the bottom tip of the country. So it's the end stop. So that's also a blocker for the trains coming through. But I managed to get on the last possible one I could have gotten, and then got to Edinburgh at midnight, I think.
Oh wow. Oh my god.
And then on the day of, I woke up, got dressed, but then got a little bit lost, I think, and I had a lot of heavy bag with me. So I sweated quite a lot.
Oh. It was quite a warm day, to be honest, as well.
It was toasty. So yeah, I get there about 10 minutes before the talk, and people are recognizing me, but because I was just so stressed, I didn't recognize anybody else. People were like, oh, Bev, talking about these things. I was like, I don't know who you are. Where do I need to be? I'm talking in 10 minutes. So, yeah. Got into the talk area, sat down, and then became aware that I had sweated through what I was wearing on the back. And I got my delivery manager to come and find me because she was at the conference. And I was like, Emma, how bad is it? What are we dealing with? And she kind of looked around at my back and she was like, oh.
Oh, she could have just lied to you. I think it would have been better. Keep your backpack on.
So in the video, I'm sat on the stage already beforehand because I was like, if I get up there, I don't have to show my back.
Good shout. Or just shuffle along the stage sideways.
Yeah. So yeah, it's funny. I mean, when you see people do talks, you see like a snapshot, but that like snapshot in time is it's like a curated experience, really. Like the amount of thought and time and prep that's gone into it is yeah, it is real, but it's not as casual as it looks, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it is, like you say, it's that it's almost like putting on a show in a way,
Yeah.
because you want to present confidently, and you really did. And I think that because it's such an important topic and field, that it's hard to really joke about it. I know that you put great humor in. You had slides with seals, and I remember it very clearly because it just really made my day. And all of those slides, I think, can still be seen on the Accessibility Scotland website. So I hope that's right, and I'll add a link at the end. But it really it's great. And then, like you say, with everything that's going around, you kind of have to block that out and then just go, right, what's the important thing? Like, the important thing is that what I'm trying to get across is that it's actually, a serious topic. And yeah, I think that you should be very proud of the talk. It was very well received. I think everyone was really engaged, and yeah, it was a job very well done.
Oh, thank you. I was so nervous about it. It was a very personal talk as well. Like, I think accessibility is a tough topic to talk about as well, isn't it? Because it's so, there is no 100% accessibility. It's about a variety of different people, all different needs, and barriers which are different barriers for different people. And there is no like one single truth to it. There's lots of truths, and I often find that quite intimidating when talking about it, because it's like, how do you encompass this huge topic into one person's voice as well? And so that often is it's quite stressful in itself. But with that talk, I very much wanted to do one that was quite personal and be like, I'm not going to talk to everybody else, but this is my experience, and made it quite personal. But then that made getting feedback on it quite hard as well, because yeah, I think there's a difference between finding like cheerleaders and getting feedback from people. And does this flow make sense as a piece of feedback versus like, does it look all right? Is this okay?
Yeah, I know. And then because it is personal, there's probably you're more than like I said about your delivery manager just lying and being like, yes, fine. You will probably experience that if you've made it about you. People are less likely to give you as brutal or honest a feedback if rather than if it's just a general topic. So that's a really interesting point, actually. And I think that there are an awful lot of cheerleaders. I'm one of them. Cheerleaders in the space. And I think it does help. I think it really helps to instill confidence, definitely. But I think that as honest as we can be, the better, because otherwise we're just kind of blowing smoke in a way at times.
Yeah. I think as well, like trying to figure out, do I want feedback on this as well? From the perspective of, this is, to some extent, it's my story, and trusting your gut on the narrative. I'm trying to get better at that. It's like having confidence in myself as well. Like, as an anxious camper, I do spend a lot of time being like, was that right? Did I do that right? And just trying to be like, no, actually, this is, I could structure it in a different way, but I'm going to go with my seals. And it landed. So that's a relief.
But yeah, phew. That was great. Awesome. And I've been very fortunate to stay in touch with you since, and we've had some back and forth chats about all sorts of things, but more recently about the state of recruitment, my job, but all specifically within accessibility in the profession. We're seeing an awful lot out there at the moment in way of content where people are discussing job descriptions that are asking for way too much, salary expectations of candidates, but then the actual salaries being offered. So as someone who has recruited in their own team, and I believe you're currently going through a selection process at the moment as well, do you have any advice for other leaders or hiring managers that are looking to engage with and retain experts within the space?
It is a tough market at the moment. I will say there's a lot going on right now. A very kind of choppy landscape. And I sometimes think as well when I see these job ads that they are a bit chaotic to be a little bit blunt about it. Like I often wonder how did they end up in a situation where they published that? And is it coming from a place of they are just really stressed and they haven't really had the chance to sit down and think about, is this practical? Or have they just kind of been given more than they can do and they've just sort of stuck it on a page to kind of get it out of their head? So, and then maybe they're under so much pressure that there's then not time or support to get peer review on it and that kind of workshopping around what's going to go in it. So there's that. And then there's also people who just really genuinely don't know, because I know that people have been doing this for a long time, but it does feel like it's on a kind of a growth phase at the moment, where it's gone from a lot of people have been doing it really well and really thoroughly for a long time to a really big kind of career growth. I mean, we've been seeing in the campaigns that there's a lot of people out there now who have been accessibility leads kind of on their own organisations, and they've done a great job of taking it and owning it, and we've got a lot of leads out there now. So yeah, it's a tough space. So I often wonder, what's the context to this ad going out? What's the story there?
Yeah. I think that what you touched on there about there being a lot of leads that have done it, sort of headed things up on their own and supported or championed things at maybe smaller companies, or there's a smaller budget in place for it. I think they're absolute foot soldiers and warriors, to take that on and without the support really, and having that all on their shoulders. However, it's really difficult because they're so used to being all fingers in all pies, touching on every part of accessibility, and then feeling like that job description actually does fit what they were doing at that time, because they were the go-to person for every element. However, you can't really translate that if they're then moving into a larger government department or a larger company that has a team support them. So I think it's again, it's so nuanced, it's so specific and particular. I think that the onus is still, it has to be with the hirers and with the recruitment teams, I think, as well, because they're the first port of call. They have to approve job specs that are being put out. But yeah, I think it's the more understanding that internal teams that aren't doing the thing, who are still involved with the process, the more they understand about just what they're asking, the better. Obviously, it's easier said than done, because being a recruiter is focused in that space. To me, it makes sense, but then you can't have a specific recruiter for one field within a large organisation. They have to work across multiple roles and spaces. But yeah, I do think that educating the recruitment team on just what they're asking for before rejecting applicants because they don't tick every box would help. Would be a step in the right direction.
Yeah, it is really tough. One thing I'm sort of observing as well is we're an industry with a lot of seniors and a lot of leads, and yeah, that is a tough. It's quite top heavy as an industry, which is a tough space, and lead means different thing in different places. my job has really changed over the years as well, in terms of from going from the single person who was doing accessibility to now my role as kind of heading up the team is very different. It's yeah, I don't do the day-to-day anymore, and there's a lot more of giving other people leadership on things, and it's yeah, it's a very different structure, and it's a tricky industry. It's really tough.
I think that we need people that have that senior level lead experience in your position, though, because you will have the understanding of how long things might take, and you've been there and done that sort of thing. So that absolutely, you know, the reason for that sort of hierarchy or level of sort of seniority, I think, is definitely needed for support more than anything, really. But then the understanding to, well, I know that you're capable of X because of, I can see that you've done it, or, you know, the identifiers are there. So yeah, but it is it can be such a minefield. It's very, very tricky from both sides. So it is. I think the unfortunate thing in recruitment, oftentimes people see hiring managers and recruiters as sort of against each other, but I think it really, really isn't the case. I think we really just need to be one and the same, like, you know, you're both working towards the same cause. You want to retain people, you want to make sure they're right, because it's the whole, you don't want to go through the whole recruitment process again anytime soon. I know that for a fact. And neither does an applicant. You know, it's there's nothing worse than being stuck looking for a job. And I think having that empathy, but having someone that, you know, really can understand where they're coming from is needed, before it just becomes an automated mess of, you're not right for this job because you didn't hit X criteria. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that is really tough. Like, there's just a lot of people in the market at the moment, and having done a lot of hiring recently, I remember at one point there was somebody I had to say, I'm sorry, you're not getting the role. And I actually cried because I really, really liked the person, but they just weren't quite the right person out of the candidates that we'd had. And that is tough when you've got one campaign with one role in it, and you're seeing all these applicants, and you're like, you're all great. Like, I would love to work with all of you, but like, I can't. And that is really tough.
Yeah. I think that you've mentioned as well, sorry, so just for full disclosure, we when we're doing podcast episodes, I send questions, guests send me notes back so that we can stay on topic, because I am a waffler. But you've mentioned in here as well about emphasizing, so on the positive side of things, I completely agree, and unfortunately it's a big part of my job, telling people they haven't got the job, and it's an awful thing to have to do. Unfortunately, a lot of recruiters put it off and don't do it over the phone, which I think is the worst thing you can do. It's just because then it's just, again, so impersonal. If they've spent time and effort going through a process, and at the end of the day, it's our business. This is how I earn money. So the least I can do is try and give them feedback and be as accurate as possible. So I think that's where we work very well together in terms of hiring managers and recruiters, is if you can just respect the time that it's taken that person, and if they're ending up with nothing at the end of it if they're not getting the job. So the least we can do is try and help them towards gaining a role, new applications, or what they can improve upon. It's really super helpful. But sorry, so yeah, another point on here on this topic was that you like to emphasize that you are a team. And could you tell us a little bit more about that and how that helps with sort of recruitment process as well?
Yeah, I like to think that's one of the big kind of selling points of my team, really, is that we are a team. I remember back when I was on my own, you'd come across things and you think, oh, what I know about, is that WCAG 1.3.1, or is that, a different one? And it's just so much easier when you've got a team to go to and say, hey, I've been in this, it's cool. I've seen this thing, I don't really know. I've got an idea, but what do the rest of you think? And then you have a debate. Like in our team, we have a fortnightly team consensus where we all bring things in where we are not really sure about. We have stand-ups every day though as well, so if anybody wants to bring anything to that, they can. And it is just it's nice to know you've got that wrapper around you so that, if you get a little bit stuck, then you can get support. And with the team structure that we have mids, seniors, and myself. There's often an escalation point as well, so lots of support to be had. And I think that's just, I wish I'd had that when I was starting out, because I think a lot of us have become leads on our own, and we haven't had that kind of, we sort of learn in the wild, really, and not all had that kind of support around us. But things like Can are great, which Heather runs with Charlie. Things like that are really great at helping with that.
Definitely. Yeah, and the events they put on are just amazing, and there are plans for me to try and revive a London-based accessibility event this year at some point, and I just don't know how I could compete. So I think my plan is actually to try and mesh them together in a way. I think that would be the best result. But yeah, I think they're phenomenal. I think a huge pulling point for accessibility and why people want to work in this field is because, as much as everyone's competing, everyone naturally is in the business world, even within government. Within accessibility, everyone cares about the common goal. Everyone's going towards the greater good, and I don't think anyone's really holding anything back and like, I'm doing this, look, this is how I've done it, this might help you. I think it's such a sharing community that it's not really seen elsewhere in tech. So yeah, as a huge empath, I think that's why I've been drawn to it anyway.
Yeah, same. Yeah, my background before tech was diversity. Well, but not before tech, but before being a developer was diversity in tech, and I really love that community. Things like Code Bar and Code First Girls, where you're getting people together and doing that skill sharing, and it's just the way forward, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think that's another thing where you're saying top heavy, lots of seniors and lots of leads in accessibility. Another thing that Heather was saying earlier today was that working with those communities to push process within design and development for accessibility first, that will help us have more junior or mid-level resources that we can sort of lean upon as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So that would be good to try and incorporate that somehow. But cool. I'm really conscious that I'm asking you way more questions than I'd put on our sheet. So I'm just going to bring it back to sort of challenges for accessibility for this year, if that's okay. So what do you, is there anything that you foresee being the biggest challenge or hurdle within digital accessibility for this year? And of course, we've got regulation change in Europe coming up next year. And I mean, I think that's going to bring about huge increased demand for those with specialist knowledge. But how do you see that being sort of dealt with?
Yeah, I think the big challenge for us as an industry is getting that junior pipeline in, because we've got a lot of seniors, and I think our next role as a community with a lot of seniors is to then create the junior and the mid roles to then bring more people in, especially junior roles. And a Home Office do lots of apprenticeships, which is really great, and that's something that I really aspire to be able to do over in my team. Fingers crossed for the future. I would love to do that. But we could do with more people. And more entry level roles as well, because a lot of us transition from being developers. You're a senior developer, you slide sideways into being a senior specialist. But what about the people who aren't developers, who maybe aren't even necessarily a digital person, but they want to get into it? But it's very difficult going from that into the senior roles that are out there. So junior roles, I think, are going to be the big challenge for us to kind of meet the demand that you're saying, pointing out is going to come with the new legislation, continuing to work with the government legislation, PS bar. Yeah, a lot of work to be done.
Lots and lots, and it just made me think. Then I know that there are sort of senior or mid-level roles being advertised across the board at the moment in accessibility, which is great to see. But I think the other part is transferable skills. I think if we can identify exactly what it is we're looking for, and knowing that someone has a passion or can demonstrate that on an interview, and, give them a task at the first stage and say, what do you know about digital accessibility and why would you like to work in the space? That can be quite a simple case study that they can do and come back with, alongside genuine passion and other maybe administrative skills or junior level experience, and splitting out a mid or senior level role so that you have the quantity of people, which I know that quality is of paramount importance, but when you've only got 8 hours of a day, if you have two people, that's 16 hours working towards the same goal, and if they're trained in the right way, then you've doubled up the help. But it's I think it's just identifying those needs, and manpower is going to be hugely needed, or people power. I think manpower is a bit misogynistic. But yeah, no, I really appreciate. I think that you're spot on with that, and hopefully I'll be able to help with that, and we can grow the network and get some more junior resources interested in the field of accessibility.
Yeah.
But that does bring me to final thoughts, Bev. So if you've got anything of real importance for you at the moment, either within accessibility or just in your personal life, then feel free to share.
Well, very importantly, deciding whether or not to get a cat or a dog or both, and when and how.
I have 3 cats. None of them are in this room at the moment. I was also allergic to cats when I've met my fiance. Still am, but she would say otherwise. But yes, I would say cat because they're not as much of a tie as a dog. But I am definitely a dog person. Well, I'm both. I'm an animal lover.
Well, I want to vote for cat then. On a more serious note, though, I think one thing I'm thinking a lot about at the moment is like what connection looks like in the current world. Sort of hopefully post-pandemic. We've all moved, haven't we? And we all live in different places, and it's more than just moving. We've made life changes off the back of the pandemic. I've moved to Margate because my grandparents are down here, and they're not having the best of times. So I'm down here, and I need to be down here. But what does that mean for me and my friendship groups? Other people have moved for similar reasons. I went from having a London group of friends to one now lives in Copenhagen. One moved up Oxford way. And then how do you still remain connected digitally? And also, how do you approach going back into the kind of physical world, carefully as well, and reflecting on the collective trauma really of the pandemic and not being allowed to hang out and all the rules in place. And that was a really big thing that we went through as a society. And what do we really? Who are we after it?
And it's I think it's what I take comfort in is that it's something that, strangely enough, not many generations will have gone through. It's a huge community thing. Like, everyone experienced it in their own way. I think it impacted some groups of people more than others, but I think as a whole we can all look back at that and go, wow, we got through that. But that's just me being ever the optimist, trying to take a good from a bad, terrible situation. But they say again, it's like, you haven't seen camaraderie like that since war times, and we're very fortunate to not be in a country that's affected directly by war. Obviously, there's horrific things happening around the world at the moment, but it's, I think, taking a positive from that is really good, and it's something you can refer back to in conversation as well, I suppose. But again, being sensitive to it.
It's the big thing. Like making new friends as well where you are now, and navigating work and maybe office changes as well. It feels like there's a lot going on that we haven't really got a kind of community language for yet, really. Not language, but the right kind of conversation around it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully we can approach that, and we'll have more conversations around it. You know, I'm only down the road as well, so if you're ever
True.
feeling like you want some company and want to go out and paint the town blue or whatever colour, then you know, you can give me a shout. So I'm more than happy to hang out. But yeah, yeah, it's just been an absolute pleasure getting to know you more and more over the last couple of years, Bev, and I hope that that continues.
Me too.
Thank you so much for today and for being on the episode. It's been great, really good insight into how you do things and coping mechanisms and things. So also for all the incredible work you do. So whenever I talk to people in accessibility, and if I ever mention who I've been speaking to, because I like to name drop, and you came up into conversation, like you're very well respected, known, and appreciated. So I hope you know that.
Oh.
Keep fighting the good fight, and I'll share links to any resources, so like the Accessibility Scotland talk we spoke about, and if you're happy for people to connect with you on LinkedIn and other socials, I'll share those. But yeah, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been great.
Thanks again to Bev for joining me today, and I just want to address the audio crackle on my side. Unfortunately, I couldn't get rid of it in the edit, but I've since upgraded my equipment, so it shouldn't happen again, and I hope that the transcript and captions will help you follow along. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one.